Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sofia and today we are discussing the books that I have read in the month of March. We are also going to be eating a poke bowl for lunch because of the lack of diversity in these books. I thought I would eat some Japanese food and bring myself. So half Pakistan and half Mexico because wow, the first six are all just all white people. And it was honestly a little uncomfortable to read like that little, I don't know, I couldn't relate to the cultural aspects of most of the books that I read this month. This month's books were solid. There were some 1 stars, there were some 4 stars, there were some 4.2 stars, and there were some in the middle. So, I started off the month reading Addicted to You by Krista, Ritchie. Oh, let's take a bite. Okay. Oh, if you're wondering what type of poke bowl I got, it was a salmon tuna poke bowl, and it comes with avocado, edamame, and normally they have seaweed salad. So, Lily is a sex addict, Lauren is an alcoholic, and they fake a relationship so that people don't question their strange tendencies and habits. So they live together, they've been faking their relationship for about 3 years. They are both super rich and have very nice things. And of course, they happen to fall in love with one another. Okay, another bite time. This is so good. Let me just say, I was not addicted to this book. The first half was pretty good. It was interesting to read about addiction. I've never experienced it, and nobody in my family has really experienced it. So it was an interesting perspective, and it made the characters a lot more likable. Otherwise, they would just be a bunch of spoiled rich kids. It really would have been nice to see more diversity. Everyone was white, and it felt very strange to read. It just felt awkward. I liked the first 40% of the book when Lauren and Lily were getting together and liked each other from a distance. But then when they were actually together, Lily kept thinking about cheating, and they were both enabling each other to continue their toxic behaviors. And it just didn't feel like an epic romance. I wanted them to break up. I wasn't rooting for the couple. I think they should go to rehab somewhere separate, and then I think Lily should move to somewhere in Europe, get away from her family and all of her existing habits, and maybe get an internship at a museum or something. I DNF'd it about 2/3 of the way through. It made me so sad reading about how toxic these people were. I just didn't enjoy learning about their relationship. So I ended up giving this book a 2-star because I thought the addiction perspective was interesting. Side note, is this how you use chopsticks? Okay, the second book was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata, and it followed Vanessa, who was the personal assistant to Aiden, who is a football star, but she was treated so badly by him, so she quit her job, rightly so, and then he comes crawling back to her doorstep and asks her if she can marry him so that he can legally stay in the US because he is from Canada. And she's like, well, I don't think so, but then is like, wait, let's make a deal, and it goes through. I loved Vanessa throughout. I really liked how she stood up for herself. And by the end, I liked Aiden. That's the thing that I really liked about this book. It was the character growth. Because both Vanessa and Aiden grew as people, matured in a very natural way. And I was worried that the book would be too long. But Zapata managed to fill the whole book with plot. There were some slow parts, but it was pretty good, and it was very natural. The character development and the slow burn romance, there was no romance in the beginning, but then by the end it was very cute and it felt very natural, and there was no insta love, which I can't stand when the characters see each other for the first time and are like, oh my god, I love you, after the 3rd time they're meeting. I did, however, have some minor issues that held me back from giving it 5 stars. I wish this book was a very slow burn, and I wish there were some more angsty moments, maybe more jealousy moments, just 'cause the romantic moments were so few and far between. So I just would have liked to see more, maybe gotten Aiden's point of view and heard some cute things from him. Also, we never see any issues with immigration. Like, the whole reason they're getting this marriage is so that Aiden doesn't get called out and booted out of the country, but we never get any interviews with, I don't know, an immigration officer? I don't know. I don't know how the process works, but I feel like somebody has to check up on their marriage, right? And we never really see that until the end where it's like quickly mentioned. And so it just didn't feel like there was any consequences, so we did this whole thing for nothing. Like, she moved into his house for nothing because nobody checked up on it. The writing style was very much like telling you what happened as opposed to showing you what happened. Like, I think at one part Vanessa was like, I was nervous. And instead of that, it would have been nice to see like my hands were shaking, or like instead of he was angry or something, I don't know, like he shook his head or the corners of his mouth turned down, something like that where you show and not tell. I don't know. And also, we kept hearing about how large Aiden was. If I heard one more time how big his frame was, I was gonna lose my marbles. Like, we got the description the first 3 times you used it. We didn't need to keep hearing it for the rest of the book. So, that being said, I gave the book 4 stars. It was a very fun read. I enjoyed my time reading it. I like salmon better than tuna in these bowls. Definitely better. The texture. It's definitely the texture. The third book that I read was Fairchild by Jaima Fixen, not Vixen, Fixen, and it was a 19th century romance, Romeo and Juliet retelling, but without the sad ending. And we follow Sophie and Tom, and we get both of their perspectives, which is nice, always nice. Sophie is a bastard to an aristocrat, and she's really not happy with her life, so she takes a big horse, goes for a ride, and it starts thundering. She falls off of her horse, and she injures her arm, so she wanders to a house where there is a tradesman who is very wealthy, but aristocrats look down on anybody who works with their hands, and so does her father, so they are a very unlikely match, and nobody wants to see them together. Their romance was very cute, and it actually made a lot of sense. Like, they just fit together. They were both very down-to-earth people. They were just chilled out, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. The only thing was the first fourth of the book, they did not meet yet, and we got so much background information and flashbacks that had no relevance to the rest of the story. Like, maybe they had one conversation that kind of related to their childhood, but oh my gosh, especially Tom, like, they went on this whole story about him in boarding school, and I was like, you really, and like about this bully that he faced, and he like saw the bully once from afar later on, and that was it. There wasn't any huge confrontation or anything, so it was like, it just was kind of a pain to get through the first fourth when the characters hadn't even met yet. The ending was also a little bit rushed, so all in all, it was a very feel-good read. It was fun, fluffy romance. I knew what I was getting into, like a solid historical romance. It was a good comfort read, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I then read My Dear Jenny by Madeleine E. Robbins. And okay, it was another predictable, feel-good Regency read. It's just a comfort read. This book felt oddly relevant for our time. So Jenny was quarantined in an inn due to an outbreak of measles, and she noticed there's this girl who had eloped to get married, but she seems very unhappy. So Jenny and the rest of the inn members, of course, also the love interest, bands together to try to free this girl, I think her name was Elizabeth, from this evil dude. and they're successful. That's a spoiler. That's kind of the first half of the book, and then they leave the inn, and that's where the plot kind of falls apart. There just wasn't really any plot, but again, it's a feel-good comfort read, so I didn't really expect there to be any plot. I liked Peter and Jenny together. I would have liked to see more scenes between them and more development of their relationship, because there were some parts that just felt kind of rushed, or like they had all these feelings out of nowhere. But I mean, they were likable people. The only thing with Jenny was she kept calling herself ugly, which was a little bit annoying. I was like, okay, we get it. And also, stop. You're not ugly. I gave this a solid 3 stars as well. Maybe it deserves 2.75, but we're gonna round it up to 3. Oh god, the next book. Ugh. I read Defenseless by Corinne Michaels. So this is the 5th book in the Salvation series. There are 2 duets of different couples, so that's the 4 books. I read the first book in the series, didn't like the couple enough to read the second book. Read about the next couple, that first book. Again, didn't really like it enough to finish the duet. But I really liked the premise of this 5th book, so I was very interested. It's technically a standalone as well, but I would have been completely lost without the context of the other 2 series. Also, I feel like I didn't need to read the second book of each duet, because the next book kind of answered all of your questions in a more succinct way. Like, I just did not need another 8 hours of that. Mark was a Navy SEAL, but he retired and now works for a security company owned by his friend. This security company has been under attack and has been targeted, so he contacts a CIA agent that he has worked with in the past and has some romantic feelings towards, and they try to work together to figure out who is targeting them. Charlie, who is a CIA agent, and Mark met in Afghanistan in a previous mission. This book, oh my god, there was absolutely no tension between Mark and Charlie. It was insta-love, which, no build-up, nothing. It was so boring to read about their relationship. I hated it. The plot wasn't even interesting enough to carry through. It was just... the banter was forced. The steamy scenes were just boring because I didn't care about the couple. I barely got through half. It took so much for me to get to the 50% mark, the halfway mark. And when that point came, I DNF'd. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I'm torturing myself. Also, don't even get me started on the race. Like, don't even get me started on the diversity. There's like one person with golden skin. Jeez. Like, oh my god. Mix it up, please. This book, 1 star. 1 star, baby. I finished. Well, I finished that quite fast. Okay. Oh, it's delicious. That was delicious. Moving along, we have Grin and Bearded by Penny Reid, where we follow Sienna Diaz. She is a star. She's like a Mindy Kaling type person where she writes her own stuff. She's a big comedian and she's also an actress. So she's filming a movie in Tennessee and she gets lost on the road. And luckily, our handsome park ranger pulls up and helps her find her way to a cabin. Okay, the relationship between Sienna and Jethro is cute. And I shipped them together. I think they were cute. They worked. The personalities complemented each other, but man, did this book get boring. The plot meandered. And they had to deal with the same problems over and over again. This book was just way too long. There was also no defined beginning, middle, or end. I was waiting for some sort of major conflict between the characters, but then by the end it just felt so anticlimactic. I would say only read this if you want a very fluffy, feel-good read. I gave it 2 stars. Also, okay, however, Sienna is a Latina, and I appreciated that. I appreciated the diversity. I appreciated the cultural elements. She did eat tacos, but it was okay. Okay, then we have Storm and Silence by Robert Thayer. I read it on Wattpad, don't judge. It was very PG/PG-13 in some parts, but mostly PG. We follow Lily, who is a suffragist in 19th century London. She feels very constricted with her life, but then manages to find a position as a secretary for Mr. Ambrose as long as she dresses as a man. Oh my gosh, I think this is one of the best historical romances that I've ever read. I loved Lily. She was hilarious, and her dynamic with Mr. Ambrose was just electric. It was enemies to lovers. There was so much action that actually furthered the connection between characters. The action continued or pushed forward the story and the plot. Because there was actual plot in it from a historical romance. I mean, who would have thought? Also, the care in which the author put into the historical elements of the story, you can tell that he is a historian, because he would mention like types of factories and types of dresses, and I don't know, you just weave in a lot of elements of the 19th century, which I really appreciated. The writing style was really clear, and it described just enough detail so that I could picture everything that was happening, but without getting bogged down like Cassandra Clare. And also, it's completely free on Wattpad. It is published, it's a published book, but I don't think they changed that much in the published version. It's also kind of nice to have comments and feel like I'm reading it with people, and when I was having a reaction, I could click on the comments and see, oh my god, other people feel like this too. Or like they would bring in an element that I didn't even think of, or like the emojis that they would use, like the skull one when they were dead. It was very funny. My one critique is that the whole idea of the suffragist movement kind of gets lost throughout the chapters, and also Lily's strong feminism kind of dwindles as we go through, and then every once in a while she'll mention it so that we get the point that she's feisty. It just would have been nice if we saw some progress in the fight for women's rights, or more discussion of that, as opposed to just seeing it as a tool to affirm that Lily is feisty. All in all, I gave this 4.2 stars. I was completely addicted for the whole book. It was quite short, so I was actually able to also read the sequel to this book, which is called In the Eye of the Storm, where we go to Egypt and we're in the desert. Also, side note, there is, in the first book, there was Kareem, who is Arab, I think. He has a turban. Maybe he's Indian, maybe he's Sikh. I don't completely know. But there was somebody of color, which was nice to see. And then we're in Egypt, where it's a lot more people. It would have been nice to see more of Kareem, and there were definitely some racist comments that we got from Lily's perspective, which I guess makes sense because of how she was raised. But it just would have been nice for her to have changed her views or gotten more sophisticated in her views. But it was very fun to read. Because Wattpad is published chapter by chapter, it didn't feel like 2 separate books. It just felt like one continuous, okay, we're going chapter by chapter, cliffhanger after every chapter, which I enjoyed. And so because it felt like one continuous book, I'm also going to give this 4.2 stars. I enjoyed it. I liked being in Egypt. It was a lot of action, lots of cute moments too. These were the 8 books that I have read this month. Please let me know how you feel about them in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video.